Every child deserves a loving and stable home. I'm Tisha Powell.
And I'm Lee Zurich, but that's not happening for thousands of foster kids in our country.
Every year, about 500 million children in the U.S. are in foster care. That care is supposed to be temporary, and there's a federal law to ensure it is.
But most states aren't following that law called the Adoption and Safe Families Act, leaving some children in foster care for years longer than intended.
Investigative reporter Kristen Crowley has an in-depth look at the foster care crisis, how we got here, and one couple's mission to find a solution.
Tisha and Lee, that law has something called a 1522 provision. It means once a child has been in foster care for at least 15 of the last 22 months and reunification with a parent is out of the question, the state must work to find them a permanent home. When the law passed in 1997, about 22 states complied by quickly moving foster children to a permanent home. Now, only 7 are in compliance. Here's why that matters. The longer a child stays in foster care, statistically, the worse their outcome is. They're more likely to be homeless, struggle in school, and have behavioral issues.
Almost 1 in 5 children who enter foster care will be there for over 3 years. It's designed so that children don't just stay in foster care long term. Why? Because all the social science evidence shows that that is not good for children.
A Kansas couple who fostered their first child in 1980 have since helped hundreds of teens who aged out of the system into adults.
When there's a coffee shop on seemingly every corner, you know what to expect. Cappuccinos, lattes, pastries. What sets Connect Cafe apart isn't what they serve, it's who they serve. And we're not talking about the customers.
This cafe specifically employs children who have aged out of the foster system.
Right. The Kansas City, Kansas Cafe was an idea brewed up by Lori and Randy Ross.
It's about working to get them to the point to where they can go to another employer and be successful.
But before we dip into the cafe, you need to learn more about the Rosses and the foster system. Early on in the married couple's life, they agreed to foster 1 child. They welcomed a little girl, and that was that. Until it wasn't.
We ended up caring for over 400 kids in the years that we were fostering and adopting.
400 children. How is that even possible?
A little bit at a time.
400 fosters, resulting in 23 adoptions and a lifelong mission to help children. They created the nonprofit Foster Adopt Connect, which advocates for foster children and connects them with families. But as passionate as the Rosses are about foster care, they wish it didn't have to exist.
Randy and I are nice people. Our kids love us. But in general, if a child has an opportunity to grow up with a member of their family, they're going to be far better off than having to mesh with the family of strangers.
The goal of foster care is to bring children and parents back together. But in the 1990s, Congress realized agencies were spending years waiting for that to happen, when parents were unengaged or making no progress. That left the children feeling the consequences, suffering in limbo.
Children need a permanent family, and when they're in foster care, they're often moving from one home to the next, and that placement instability leads towards poor outcomes in education, in health, in their social well-being.
So lawmakers passed the Adoption and Safe Families Act. After a certain amount of time and lack of involvement from the parents, states must work to terminate a parent's rights. The child can be adopted and not linger in foster care. But Ryan Hamlin with the National Council for Adoption says most states aren't following that law. He says as many as 100,000 children can't be adopted who would otherwise be eligible because the states haven't terminated their parents' rights, leaving the children in the system for years longer than intended.
When 1 in 5 children is going to spend over 3 years in foster care, when over 10% are being emancipated without any permanency, without any permanent family, we have failed all of those children.
Do you feel like the system failed you?
Yes. Yeah.
Samantha Curry aged out of the system nearly 2 decades ago.
I was literally just trying to make it on my own, and I didn't know how.
She says it took years to land on her feet.
I've been to about 10 different foster homes.
Antonio Ward is still trying to find his footing.
What has life been like for you now, post foster care, being on your own?
Rough. Very rough. My apartment I am in now, I'm like 2 months behind on rent.
He aged out of the Florida foster system just a few years ago. Every day, he says, is a struggle.
Who do you lean on when you need help?
Don't have nobody but myself.
And that brings us back to Connect Cafe.
A year ago, I was in a mental hospital. So I didn't think I was getting nowhere. I left home at 15 because it was a very toxic household.
Diamond Preston is now 17 and says getting the job at Connect Cafe was a lifeline.
When I started working here, they became a part of the support system.
What's your favorite part about working here?
Randy's.
Wonderful.
Good guy?
Yeah. I feel like I've never had a bad day here. And I have bad days, just not when I'm here. You have a great day.
Randy's kind of a charmer, so.
You bet.
But it's more than charm,
Thank you very much for doing that.
making an impact.
The kids graduate from high school. We're making sure that one of us is there. We're part of the family.
We are creating solutions to system problems, and we'd invite anybody that's interested to reach out to us.
It's a connection any foster children otherwise wouldn't have.
As for the more than 40 states not in compliance with the Adoption Safe Families Act, experts say the Department of Health and Human Services has the power to hold those states accountable and could threaten their funding for not following the law. But that's never happened. So we asked HHS. The agency would not agree to an on-camera interview and did not answer our questions via email.